In the early 1950s, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote a few pages of a potential sequel to The Lord of the Rings, but he quickly abandoned the idea. In the late 1960s, he came back to it and typed up a fresh draft of its opening, but then abandoned it again. He tinkered with this potential continuation of the story of Middle-earth until just months before his death in 1973. Clearly Tolkien had a vision for something after the ring was destroyed, and so we just have to ask ourselves, why the Lord of the Rings sequel, The New Shadow, didn't happen. These days, you can read a version of the manuscript in The Peoples of Middle-earth, Volume 12. Tolkien wanted the story to take place first, after Aragorn's death, second, at least 100 years after the fall of Sauron, and third, just about within living memory of the War of the Ring. Near to Osgiliath, across the plain from Minas Tirith and Gondor, Borlas is working in his garden when his neighbor Ceylon wanders over for a chat. It becomes clear that Ceylon is a member of a secretive group of men who are followers of Harumor, a rebellious Númenórean who went over to the Haradrim before the Last Alliance centuries earlier. At the end of the draft, Ceylon tells Borlas that if he wants to know more about this secret society, the Southrons, he must dress all in black and wait by the gate behind his house. Borlas is half convinced that Ceylon intends to kill him for speaking out against the group earlier, but he decides to go anyway, to remind these young men of how terrible the War of the Ring was and why they must try to preserve peace. The old man Borlas, the hero of the tale, is the younger son of Beregond, one of the guides for Pippin in The Return of the King, while Gandalf was busy with Denethor.
Long has he foreseen this doom.
Beregond helped Pippin rescue Faramir from the Steward of Gondor and later became Faramir's captain of the guard, and moved to the region of Gondor governed by Faramir, Ithilien. In 1964, Tolkien said he could have written a thriller about the Satanistic cult plot and its discovery and overthrow, but that it would have been just that, implying he did not think much of thrillers, and therefore was not worth doing. To those of us who enjoy thrillers, the idea of one set in Middle-earth is rather appealing. The Hobbit is a whimsical children's fairy tale, and The Lord of the Rings is an epic fantasy, so a third sequel in a third genre would not necessarily be so strange or confusing for readers. In between drafts, he explained that he had abandoned the story because it was, quote, sinister and depressing. It had already been established that the fading away of elves, dwarves, and hobbits, and the rise in power of men meant an inevitable decline. The people of Gondor would inevitably become discontented and restless during a time of prosperity. Aragorn's descendants would become kings and governors like Denethor or worse, and Gondorian young boys would be playing at being orcs and going round doing damage. The story was going to explore an outcrop of revolutionary plots centered around a secret satanistic religion. Tolkien's conviction that a world run by men will inevitably decline might have produced a less compelling story than his ultimately optimistic earlier works. Tolkien had an unfortunate habit of assigning personality characteristics to entire species. Hobbits are merry, elves are wonderful, dwarves love and desire beautiful things made by hands and by cunning, and men are, apparently, prone to devil worship if left in peace for too long. A story in which characters inevitably succumb to various temptations just because they are biologically prone to do so would be far less interesting. Tolkien lived through 2 world wars and was writing during the Cold War. He experienced the Cuban Missile Crisis and the assassination of JFK. It is perhaps no wonder that he was pessimistic about the future of humankind. And maybe it is also understandable why, having developed the view that after Aragorn's death the only way for men was down, he decided he simply did not want to tell that story.
Here at last, on the shores of the sea, comes the end of our fellowship. My work is now finished.
Do you think Tolkien should have continued exploring this sequel? What would you have liked to see within it? Read a longer version of this story on denofgeek.com.